Well, you would think that after 276 of these videos that I would have the technicalities down at least. But somehow I forgot to turn on the microphone. And I did this whole, what I'm going to do again, I did it completely, 33 minutes and 33 seconds, and hadn't turned on the mic. So I guess I have to consider it a practice run. But anyway, I wanted to kind of backtrack, like I said, after 276 sharings. I've shared a lot, but I haven't really shared, although I've shared about my experience, I haven't shared about myself much, about my history. And as I'm reaching a transition again, where I'm going to take it the step beyond, the next step after having worked on these YouTube videos since, I believe, January 18th, 2018. And this transition is that I'm in the process of establishing a place where I can begin to share, but more importantly, provide a place that people can come and sit with me in meditation. And this all came about when my meditation, it kind of turned that old adage I've been talking about, telling people not to really search out, not to really worry too much about finding a teacher. That when the student was ready, the old adage, when the student is ready, the teacher would appear. Well, that got turned on its head in a way for me, in that it came to me strongly in my meditation that when the teacher is ready, the students will appear. And I took that as a notice that indeed the teacher, being me, is ready, and I'm in the process of converting my garage to a zendo, and a zendo is simply a meeting hall where people can practice Zen, sitting meditation, in a safe environment with my guidance, my presence. So recently I met this random meeting, happenstance, right? I was out in the middle of nowhere with my brother riding a bike. I mean, literally nowhere, up against the mountains. And a gentleman with a big smile came riding up on a scooter and started off, "Where are you guys from?" And he was really just a friendly man, energetic. And I ended up standing there and talking to him. My brother decided to say hello, and then he had to get on home. But I ended up spending a better part of an hour speaking with Peter. And many of you will know him by his 15-character self-given name. And he was sharing with me about how he's running for mayor of Chiayi, and he had a lot. He knew a lot about. He was really into powerful, positive thinking. And anyway, I liked his energy, and I felt like he was grounded, is solid like a rock. He's sure of himself and sure of what he's doing and greets life with a smile. But he mentioned that he has people that maybe his network is bigger than mine, and he said that he would be willing to share. He'd like to share. Because I shared with him kind of my vision and my projects and the things I had in mind. And at the time I told him, well, I wasn't really ready to go public, but perhaps you could refer people to this YouTube that I've been working on for a couple of years. And he said he would certainly be happy to. Well, it's in that spirit he asked me for my story. And I think it's a good time to share. Maybe I have new viewers, and maybe some of the old viewers really didn't know that much about me. So I just want to give you spend the next half an hour, that's 27 minutes now, telling you a little bit about me. And we always, it's good to start at the beginning, isn't it? My family name is Hayes, Hayes. My given name is Dennis. My middle name is Michael. So it's Dennis Michael Hayes. And I was born on March 4th, 1948, to George Norman Hayes and Margaret Louise Copeland. And they both were civil servants on the China Lake Naval Air Station in the western Mojave Desert in the state of California. And even I was conceived at government housing on the base, but the nearest hospital was in Ridgecrest. So forever after, my birthplace was listed as Ridgecrest. But now, living in Taiwan, surrounded by ethnically Chinese people, I think it's interesting and fun to share that I came from China Lake, California. And here I am, 72 years later, sitting and sharing. So I stayed in the desert. I stayed in the desert, I guess it was only a couple years, because my brother was born 2 years after me, and he was born in Oxnard, California. And again, by then we had to have moved, my mother, my father, and I moved to Thousand Oaks, California. And the nearest hospital for Jim's birth was Oxnard. So I had a younger brother, James Lynn Hayes, born in 1950 in Oxnard, California. And before I turned 4, I think in the December, it was around Christmas, before I turned 4, that my father passed away. And my mom was left with 2 boys, and she was 7 months pregnant, I'm guessing, with my sister, Mary Margaret Hayes, who will be forever known as Molly Hayes. But she wasn't born until, apparently, pretty soon after my father's passing. The Paulsons, this great family that had kind of adopted us through the Lutheran church that both my parents were attending, and took my brother and I in and allowed my mom to go home with her sorrow and her pregnancy. So my sister was born in Norfolk, Virginia, but then they were to return back to Thousand Oaks, where I lived until probably halfway through the third grade. Halfway through the second grade? Halfway through the second grade. And my mom bought her first house in Somis, California, which is still today a very small community near Camarillo, which is better known and much larger, but in Ventura County. And we stayed in Somis until, I'm guessing, halfway through the third grade. And we moved to Oxnard, California. My mom sold her house in Somis and bought a house in Oxnard. I guess primarily because it was closer to her work at Point Mugu Naval Air Station. Anyway, we're now in Oxnard. And this is where, this is where my mom enrolled us in the AAU swimming program. And I think it was partially to just burn off our extra energy and also to give us something to do after school until she could come home after work. So we were in the AAU swimming association. We would swim daily after school. And our coach was Mr. Pete Coutinho, who would later be a famous coach that would coach at Berkeley, both swimming and water polo, and become quite a well-known figure in the swimming and particularly the water polo world. So we were blessed with having this. He was a young man then, and of course, after AAU, when it came time for high school, after continue with AAU, the swimming club, until all the way through elementary school, through my time at Haydock Junior High School, which is the 7th and 8th grade, until my time of enrolling at Oxnard High as a freshman. It was a 4-year high school. And Mr. Coutinho was my coach once again for the water polo and swimming team. And we still maintain a close relationship with the Paulsons, the family that had taken my brother and I in for a while as my mom went to the East Coast too and gave birth and dealt with what she had to deal with and came back. So the Paulsons looked out, Norse and Siggy Paulson looked after us. And I'm forever a Paulson boy, as is my brother. Because Mama Sig, the matriarch of the Paulson clan, had many kids. She was a nanny, and she took care of many kids. So we were blessed, and the Paulsons had 2 boys, Kurt and Paul. Paul was my age, and Kurt was a year ahead of us. Anyway, forever grateful to the Paulsons for their kindness in my mother's and our times of need. And they have remained, Paul has remained, and Kurt have remained lifelong friends, even though time passes and things happen. But I'd be remiss to mention the importance of the Paulsons in my story. So it was in Oxnard where I first ran across a book that my mom had on her bookshelf, The Autobiography of a Yoga by Paramahamsa Yogananda. And just as soon as I picked up the book, it just rang so true with me. And it was an instant connection. Paramahamsa became my teacher, even though he had passed away, moved on, transitioned in 1954. I immediately learned from him and just felt this teacher, disciple relationship. And he was known, he's the first yogi to come to America, and he founded the Self-Realization Fellowship, and still going strong. Swami's, a famous surf place in San Onofre in Southern California, is a big house, that big place that was part of the Self-Realization Fellowship. And I recently, in recent memories, was able to go to his retreat, his beautiful location in the hills above Malibu. Beautiful, special place. But this man was this introduction, Autobiography of a Yogi was my introduction. And I learned the rudimentaries. I learned that I just could sit, meditate. I started my meditation without any support system. I started my meditation system and started studying, just absorbing. And my mother was very interested in the metaphysical, the Western expression of spirituality. And ladies' names like Annie Besant, the famous theosophist, and the Rosicrucians. These were metaphysical, Western metaphysical teachings. And Mom had it all, and I read it all, and just absorbed it all. So this was also very influential. Annie Besant and Madame Blavatsky. Madame Blavatsky was a Rosicrucian, and Annie Besant was the another group. Rosicrucians. And I mentioned it earlier. Anyway, this exposure to Western teaching and Western teachers was important and was already helping me to define who I am. But I have to go back again, backtrack, because my earliest memory, my goal, my ambition, my focus was always about the spiritual. I sensed what was missing. I wanted to examine the big questions. Why am I here? Who am I? These big questions seem more important than almost anything. And they've just driven me my whole life. Theosophy, Annie Besant Theosophy, Rosicrucians, Madame Blavatsky, got it. Anyway, this drive inside of me has been probably the only constant, and it comes with my earliest memory. This drive, this desire, this to entertain, to try to understand why we're here and what is here, and other metaphysical questions. So here I was in Oxnard, experimenting with meditation, swimming several hours a day, and absorbing, reading anything that I could get on my hands on that advanced my understanding of what I had an inkling of. I knew there was something there. And I also knew that I would get it, even though I didn't know I didn't know what it was. So during our high school, this is my second year of, halfway through my second year. Well, previous to this, my mom got remarried after being single for a long time. And luckily for us, because this transition of just being free, all of a sudden to have a stepdad who tried to, his biggest mistake was he tried to discipline us, and it just doesn't work. We were the wild things. We'd been on our own, fended for ourselves for far too long for him to be able to come in and exercise any control over us whatsoever. But fortunately for all of us, for him included, he got a placement. He was also a civil servant, and he got a placement in Pongo Pongo, American Samoa. So he went away, and for a year and a half we continued life. It was kind of a reprieve, back to how it was before. But then he sent for us, and I remember the hard, departing, especially water polo. I was excelling in it, and I had the best coach. But at the same time that this was developing, my coach got an offer to go to Berkeley. So he was leaving, and somebody knew, Coach Miller, I believe, another teacher was coming in to take his place. So the timing was easier to make the break than one would have thought. And we moved to American Samoa, and we're there for about a year and a half. Basically, we were there only as long as it took us to convince our mother that this wasn't working out and she needed to leave for all of our sakes, her sake, as well as ours, the three of us, and leave him. And it was a beautiful time in Samoa. It was kind of push-pull because it was such a beautiful culture and such a beautiful people. And we learned truly how to be island people. Little did we know that this was preparing us for the next step. And it's so funny how that works out. So she got it together, and my mom's done amazing things, raising 3 children, basically single. And she got it together and left him, and we left Samoa with our dog King, our female dog named King. Yes, beautiful dog. Anyway, we got on the plane. We were going back to, we don't know, Los Angeles was the destination, but we didn't know. We'd go back to Oxnard, we'd go to Thousand Oaks. What was in Oxnard by this time for us, And at Honolulu Airport, I was tired. So Molly, my sister, my brother Jim, and my mom went downstairs, got off the plane and wanted to go check on our dog and make sure she was okay. And something happened. I know some magic happened with the 3 of them, maybe the 4 of them with the dog. They came back and woke me up and said, "We're getting off here. We're staying in Honolulu." Okay. Where I was to basically remain for the next 33 years. So we went from a basically agriculture, Oxnard, famous for beets and lima beans and citrus trees, to Samoa, American Samoa, which was about as far, if you can just picture me, newly arrived from California with my light blue Levi's, my black Converse shoes, and my Madras shirt in the middle of a humid jungle. And I mentioned the clothes because that's what I can remember, because I've always had a sense of style, my style, and maybe I'm showing it to you. Maybe you've seen it on the videos. I have my own style, which is important to me. I work on it, believe it or not. But that transition, and then to Hawaii, where I came back, it seemed like we always moved halfway through a semester. It's almost like my mom planned it. Maybe she did, to make us more adaptive and more flexible. But I came to Oxnard, to Roosevelt High School in 1963, in the beginning of, halfway through the first semester of my junior year of high school, and managed to graduate. Went on to the University of Hawaii, where I would to begin an extended academic career, but took up studying Eastern philosophy. And University of Hawaii was quite renowned for having this great Eastern philosophy. Really had some fantastic instructors. So I started learning about the Vedas and then the Upanishad, and I got introduced to my favorite literature, the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's, the travails of Arjuna, and the lectures and the guidance that he got and the lessons within. I used to have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu, I believe, was the manifestation of the Hindu trilogy. Vishnu talking to Arjuna about, it was about a battle, but it was bigger than a battle for the universe, I guess. So here I was, formally trained, and at the same time, I had managed to attract a group of like-minded friends, and we were meditating on a bi-weekly basis in a group, and we had candles burning and incense burning in the dark, and a gong, and chanting Om, and really an awesome time. But it was the first group, and it was just a group of friends, and no one of us, I guess if anyone knew more about the things above meditation, it was probably me. But somehow this happened. And it continued from late high school on into my university years. And when I left school, without graduating from University of Hawaii, I left school to work and try to survive, and became more and more deeply involved in my practice, and I reached out and I found at that time there was more groups, and I could see different groups and had different experiences, but nothing that I wanted to join. I was never a joiner. Didn't want to join. Didn't want to follow anyone except myself. Somehow I just knew to be true to myself and not to surrender to. And I still had Parahamsa, even though, it's not the same to have a guru, a teacher in a incarnation, in a physical form. And time passed. I managed to get married. I managed to have a son, and at the same time, still practicing informally my meditation, even though my wife didn't really understand. It didn't inhibit me from still continue. Then we're divorced. And then I needed to get away. I needed to get away. But so I made a trip to Thailand, and then I got really involved in I met Thai people. I met the bumblebee monk, the monk that lived with the bees. I saw giant Buddha footprints, and I was recognized the Thai people were the first to recognize me as a spiritual being. They were attracted to me, and it just was magnetic, this trip to Thailand. And upon returning, a friend introduced me to a Renzai Zen center, and where I began, I did the whole practice, and I did all the way up to the third year. When I was timed, I could have been ordained as a monk, and I chose not to. I chose to stay in the world and see what my adventures still lie ahead. Well, I have to speed up here because it's taking longer than I thought. I came to Taiwan in 1997 and continued my spirituality, continued my practice, and after being here for 17 or 18 years, I was introduced to a man that became my teacher, and I stayed with him for 6 years and learned until it was time for me to move on. There comes a time in every student's life and progress that the teacher is left behind. In fact, and that, anyway, I began to meditate more again. And I had that 33 years of experience in the Renzai Zen tradition. And then I'm then morphed into, I don't limit where my information comes from. I'm open to all. But that leads us up to the current moment as I'm sitting here with you, telling you that in my meditation it came to me just as when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Well, it turned its head and said, when the teacher is ready, the students will appear. So now I'm ready. I'm putting together a dojo, a Zen dojo. I'm converting my garage to offer a space that I can publicly be with people and offer them a sanctuary and a place to learn and study.